Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Pundits podcast. My name is Nathan, and I am joined once again by my ever-faithful co-host, Evan.
We're back, baby. We're back again.
Let's hope we keep it this way and not leave 2 months before another episode.
I mean, Christmas may be a bit rough, but, you know.
We'll make it happen. We'll
figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Lots to talk about this week. I apologise to anyone that doesn't want to listen to F1 because it's going to be a very F1 heavy podcast this week. We're planning to record another episode tomorrow once most of the Champions League football is wrapped up, and we'll have a little bit of everything in that one. But there's a lot going on in the world of F1 this week, so we thought we'd dedicate its own episode.
Shall we get into it then, Nath?
Let's. Where do you want to start, bro?
Well, let's start with how the week started for every F1 fan with the news that Lewis Hamilton tested positive for coronavirus.
Yep.
So that was a bit of a bummer for any Merc and British fans. So that was then the whole F1 media and the whole F1 world was like, oh, who's going to replace him? There was
even you didn't believe at first, bro.
I had no idea until I remembered.
I put it in the F1 group chat. I was like, maybe it may happen. And everyone just shot me down, bro. Like, no, it's never going to happen. I honestly couldn't believe when they announced that George Russell would replace him. I thought there was no way. And like I said, I forgot about the Fisichella when he replaced Massa at Ferrari when he got hit by the spring. So that was one of those situations where, you know, injured or ill driver this time is being replaced by... Definitely.
It's weird when someone else goes from a team to another team.
Yeah.
Mid-season, well, not even mid-season, just for a race.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what we're alluding to is the fact that George Russell was then confirmed by Mercedes to be racing at the Sakhir Grand Prix.
One of the things that pretty much every F1 fan in the world was dying to see was George Russell in a good car, just because he hasn't really had the platform to show how good he is at, you know, that natural racing flair. And for him to finally have a platform to do that, it really was something quite special. And we did see, we'll come more to George Russell's race as a whole, but it was nice to see what he's actually capable of. And obviously some of the media reports saying Lewis Hamilton's not feeling great with COVID, so once again, I doubt Lewis Hamilton is watching or listening to our podcast, but we hope you're on the mend, Lewis, and hope we see you back in the car. Well, if it's not this week, it's going to be Dhabi, hopefully. It's going to be after
back for the new season in 2021. So you can ask for a better audition if you're George Russell of where you can see yourself being in a few years. Maybe
not even in a few years.
Maybe we'll get into that.
We'll get into that
later.
Yes,
some interesting things on social media if you believe this sort of thing. Like when players in football post, you know, sometimes they post or like tweets or stuff, and it's just social media is just one of those things. But anyway, so. Obviously, George Russell was confirmed. We also had a bit more good news with Romain Grosjean.
Yeah, nice to see him down at the circuit.
Yep, thanking all the
back
all
doing
the staff.
Some physio, it looks like.
Yeah, he's recovered very well, considering. I mean, obviously, he's got his hands bandaged up completely, but it was just nice to see him, you know, thanking...
I think the fact that he's alive is a miracle.
Yeah, that might be a better point. So he was there thanking everyone, thanking the doctors, thanking the trackside staff. So again, good to see him, and I think that pretty much covers... Oh, well, there was a bit more news, wasn't there? With the now newly crowned F2 champion.
Mick Schumacher.
Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin have been confirmed as Haas's drivers for 2021 and into the future.
And look, right, Haas needed fresh faces because whatever they've been doing for the last couple of years just hasn't worked.
Fresh faces and cheap drivers because they're struggling a lot.
Yeah.
Understandably, you know, they're not a works team. They're not a massive team.
No.
I know they got the American ownership, but they're not the biggest team.
No.
So,
and I think fresh faces were needed at Haas to try and lift them out of this rut that they're in. You know, sometimes that's what it takes to bring a team to a bit like what happened at McLaren. Like when they got rid of Alonso, everything miraculously became a lot better at McLaren after they got rid of Alonso. So sometimes Perez faces, you need
even Merck to a certain extent. With Nico Rosberg retiring, it allowed Valtteri Bottas to come in.
Yeah,
and that allowed more stability and a more cohesive unit at Mercedes.
I can get behind that.
But yeah, you're right. Sometimes they need the fresh blood, and I think Mick Schumacher. Listen, we know he's had a great season in F2, and is he the best F2 driver? No, probably not. You know, you're looking at your Robert Schwartzman, your Callum Ilott, even your Jack Aitkins, really good.
Yeah, like Dan Guan Yu Zhou,
Dan Ticktum.
But I think what you get with Schumacher, Tsunoda. I think it comes down to this in F1, is you need to have. I know in economics and finance, sometimes they talk about companies having an economic moat. You know, something that they have that no one else has, and that's what you get. And if you look at all the drivers on the grid, most of them have got something that nobody else brings to the table, and that's how you get a seat in F1 really. Whether it's you're like Perez and you got sponsors that nobody else can bring, you can bring money to the team that no one else can, and things like that.
Well, you say that he still got fired, so
true but you get what I'm saying. You know, they have that, and that's what Schumacher brings to the team for me.
He also brings the name.
I was going to say, he brings the Schumacher name, he brings the sponsors, and you know, he might not be the best driver. He's a pretty good driver.
Listen, he's still really good.
He's won the F2 championship, so you can't take that away from him.
He's great. He had like 10 podiums this year. He's a great driver. I'm just saying, is he the most polished at the moment? No. He's put off some brilliant moves, very reminiscent of what his father did, you know.
I think having him in the sport, particularly at Haas, like you said, Haas is struggling, and I think having the Schumacher name at Haas is a big thing for them. Would I have liked to see them go to Alfa Romeo? Yes. Am I not unhappy that he's going to Haas? No. I would like to see more F2 drivers given a chance to race in Formula One. So. You know, it's a thing that it's a bit like professional football sometimes. The academy players, they never quite make it because they either the opportunity just doesn't arise, or they're just simply not good enough.
It's even worse
which sometimes happen. Yeah, if you look at the trickle through talent that you get from F2, sometimes it's barely anything that makes it up from, you know, single seat racing into full top tier F1 racing.
Well, the champion of F2 last year went to Formula E. So they didn't even get the champion.
Exactly. Why?
So it's one of those things that they can't.
And that's like what we've touched on before. Is sometimes Formula One does become a bit too much about money. And
money talks. Money
talks, especially in a sport that's as expensive as Formula One. And yeah, it's one of the things. I personally would like to see more talent-based things, but
trust me, after watching this weekend, if you were looking at the drivers who should get into that other Ferrari stable, you'd say Schwartzman and Callum Ilott would probably be your two number one picks. Probably Mick Schumacher might be above them. I'd say Ilott and Schumacher would make a formidable partnership.
Definitely.
But, you know, Schwartzman might... I think Ilott will probably be targeting that Alpha seat in 2022.
Definitely. And that's the thing with Schumacher at Haas. I don't see it being a long-term thing, 1 or 2 years tops probably, before he tries to move on to bigger and better things.
How many years has Sainz got? 2?
I think as soon as that Ferrari seat comes open, so it'll be another Schumacher in a Ferrari.
Well, yeah, let's be honest. As long as he proves himself, Carlos Sainz is a placeholder.
Pretty much, but that's the thing. Sainz had a good weekend actually.
Sainz has had a great drive.
Shall we move on to the race?
Yes, let's move on to qualifying first. Actually, that was a
the race weekend. Then, shall we?
Yeah. Let's move on to the race weekend. It was enthralling because we've never seen lap times this quick. We've never seen into under 1 minute since Long Beach. Years ago.
I know, it's kind of crazy. Like you'd look at the race, the lap counter, you'd look away for what seems like no time at all. You come back and then it's like, laps have elapsed.
Yeah, exactly. And 53.377 pole for Bottas.
Yeah, let's talk about quali, shall we? Well, let's go back. Let's go back. Practice. We saw George Russell very high up the table, and everyone was like, "Ooh, what's going to happen?" You know, there's that excitement when you see George Russell at the top of a leaderboard, and everyone's like, well, let's wait till quali. Let's see what happens. Because, practice times have been famously this season quite misleading at some tracks. So you want to run us through qualifying?
I was going to say, do you want to go back even a little bit further when George Russell said on the Thursday, I don't fit in the car.
Yeah,
it's made for a man who's
slightly problematic, really, isn't it?
And he was wearing a size of shoe smaller because otherwise he wouldn't be able to control the brakes. So
yeah, it's not ideal, really, is it?
It's not what you want to hear from a driver. But then,
looking at him sat in the car, like you're just like, that doesn't look right, does it?
No, and you could tell it's made for Lewis, and the height is set for them, and they're smaller drivers. Merc clearly have a target that they want to go for. I think they'll probably change after this weekend. But so going into the weekend, he tops the first two practices, and we're like, oh my god, what's going on here?
What is going on?
And it was another case of don't say it. Come on, let's. And everybody in the back of your head, you're like, surely you can't do it. Surely you can't do it. And then qualifying comes. He's just 26 milliseconds off.
No, 0.002 of a second, I think, off pole.
It was so tight. There was only 5 100ths closing over the top three between the times.
Yeah, kind of crazy, really, isn't it?
Just silly how quick they were going and how good they all were. And so your top three was Bottas, Russell, and Verstappen, and it was tasty. Even fourth, Leclerc, you were like, wow.
Yeah, let's give a shout out to Charles Leclerc. How the bleep he parked that car where he did in quali was just nuts. Like, considering how bad that car was at the start of the season, it's still not a great car, but they've obviously made some upgrades to it. Yeah,
you'd say until Sunday, Leclerc was on for driver of the weekend,
and it was crazy.
And then
we will get into that.
Yeah.
We will talk about the absolute dumpster fire that was the first lap of the race. But
so Russell really impressive.
A lot of impressive driving
in his first qualifying in a Mercedes. He said was like trying to squeeze into a bathtub.
Well, a car that's too small, in shoes that were too small, that you can't really see out of. To do that is, I guess, we've said it for a long time. We've only been doing this since whenever, like July or whatever it was. But since we started, we have backed George Russell as one of the most talented drivers on the circuit. Yeah. And I think even like the F1 fans that just tune in every week and watch the race and don't really care about all the technical stuff about F1. Anyone you speak to will say that George Russell is probably one of the most talented drivers on the grid. And I think doing that in a car that's not built for you, in the state that it was in, it just goes to show how good you are.
As much as I love, I still personally think that Max and Charles are a different level to the other younger drivers because they're in bigger, better teams. I think if there was any debate between who's the best out of Russell, Albon, Norris, all in the same,
put to bed this weekend.
To be honest, it's almost been put to bed beforehand. If it wasn't put to bed, it was cemented.
Yeah,
the nails on the coffin. George Russell is the best driver out of those three.
Yeah,
hands
absolutely.
Down, no questions
asked. And he's in the worst car.
And he was in the worst car. Yeah,
I know, it's crazy, really, isn't it?
And everyone's going to say about the Mercedes.
I don't care about that. I've just become completely muted to that argument.
Yeah.
Whenever anyone starts making that argument, I just zone out.
Yeah,
instantly stop listening.
This is Formula One. This is a sport. We've got to go fast. If you don't go fast, you're going to be at the back.
Yeah.
Use your bloody head. Come on.
I know.
It does my head in when people
people bang on about that, and then it's only because they got the best car. I'm like, yeah. It's the best car, but you've got to be able to drive it.
Yeah, you still got to drive it.
You still got to be able to drive. Like, look up the difference between Bottas and Hamilton. Yeah. Hamilton is leagues away from Bottas in the same car. Exactly. So,
have you seen what Charles Leclerc did last year in a good car? I drove it into the wall half the time. Like, come on, Seb Vettel's spinning the Ferrari
again this weekend.
The spinning top. We saw it on Friday. It was just like, there he goes again. You're like, oh, there it is.
And there it is.
You just expect it now. I feel bad for the guy.
I know, because the car is obviously not very stable.
But luckily, he's on to bigger and better things next year at Aston Martin.
We'll come to that also, I think.
Yes, I think there's a big... Anyway, shall we get into the race?
Let us.
Do you want to run us through the first lap incident then?
literally, I just don't know what was going. I think you could have chalked it down to a racing incident, really, but I think Charles Leclerc has to take some blame. But I think he has to take a little bit of blame, but I still think I would chalk it down to a racing incident.
But what you have to start with is the fact that
George Russell off the line and straight past Bottas, some lovely overtake, really, really nice overtake.
He just beat him. It was,
Bottas had a terrible start.
Was it 410s? I think we saw on the graphics. He got to the first
shocking start. Bottas just bogged it down. It happened to him last week as well. Just bogged the car down off the line because Max made a big inroads up to Bottas. Was lucky that he managed to hold second place.
He was very lucky that George moved across and they basically pincered Verstappen.
Because Perez and Verstappen looking likely to overtake Bottas.
Yeah,
and really he's very lucky. But and then you had the incident between Leclerc, Perez, and Verstappen. So they say it all the time. 3 into 1 just doesn't go. Yeah. It just doesn't go.
Very similar to the start of that race is when I thought was going to happen was
to me
with Max in the Singapore Grand Prix when he got pincered by the Ferraris.
To me though, Max and Leclerc should have known that Perez he was in front for a start and he was taking the racing line.
Do you know what? For once, I'm actually not going to blame Max Verstappen.
I'm not going to blame any of them.
Crazy.
You've got to think of it this way. Personally, in my opinion, Perez was the least in the wrong out of the 3 because there's an argument to be made that said he should have left a gap, but he had the racing line.
I'd actually disagree with that. I think Max is actually the one who's got the least.
Really?
Yeah, well, because if you think. When you look at it, he didn't actually get hit by anyone. He just got run off the road because there was no room.
I guess.
Got unlucky with the gravel trap. He actually left. I
think we can both agree that Charles was the one that was most.
Charles is most. I'd say then Sergio because he also needs to know that there's cars inside of him. You can't really hit that apex.
I get that.
I don't know if he's because obviously turn 4 was up towards the old track. I don't know if he's still got it in his head that he's got to. Go that way possibly.
I get that, but there was 3 cars there. Yeah, you can kind of forget about the cars behind those because they would have had to go around.
Yeah, listen, it's still Charles's
but
fault.
Really Perez, in my mind, was entitled to take the line that he did because Max almost backed off-ish really.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So that's why Max is the least at fault because he wasn't actually involved.
I think Charles just got. Maybe he had thought he had more room than he did, but like I said, I'm not blaming anyone. I personally think you could chalk it down to a racing incident. Both there are 2 sides to that story where cases could be made for Perez and Charles. People could say Perez should have left more space because he, like you said, he should have known there was cars on the inside. There was many cars coming up to that corner, which he would have been able to see. And then there are other people that say,
but like you said, he's not responsible for the cars inside of him.
No,
but. By the same token,
but I think Charles was just going for that late break overtake, and you see locked up as well. That's not his fault.
Just similar
the car locks up.
It's similar to Brazil last year. It's similar to what Hamilton did to Albon. He thought he saw a gap. There was no gap when you look at it on the replay. He's locked up. He's gone into the side of him. Chalk it down. Charles' fault. I think that's how you do it.
Personally, I think that Ferrari are the most to blame for making a car that locks up every time it breaks. Because if the car hadn't locked up, you probably wouldn't have crashed.
The car's wheels don't rotate enough.
Yeah, I felt bad for Max. I felt the worst for Max out of that situation because to take back what I said, to be fair, that Max really didn't have much to do with that, and shame he couldn't bring the car around after he went into the gravel.
When he was interviewed afterwards, saying they were like, "Oh, Charles taking blame." He's like, "So he should."
That's true.
It's like, yeah, he should, but also you never take blame. But we're not getting in. I'm not going to start.
I felt bad because I actually think the race would have been amazing if Max had stayed in it because it almost got to the point. The race ended up being a lot different. But what I'm saying is, if certain events hadn't
before the first pit stops, you were looking at it, and it was. Okay, there's the Mercedes.
There was no battle at all.
Where's everyone else?
Yeah, like I said, if certain events hadn't transpired, Merc would have finished miles ahead of everyone.
Somehow, despite being punted by a Ferrari, Sergio Perez managed to...
I think we need to have a chat about Perez. In the fact that he's still unconfirmed for a seat next year is a joke. The man comes from last place... and wins. Well, which is always an achievement.
That's the spoiler for the race is that Sergio Perez went from last after having a Ferrari spin him and turn him around, and he went on to win the race. How the events of that race unfolded, we'll get into, but it's crazy to me that he doesn't have a seat.
It's
anywhere.
actually ridiculous. Which we have. Should we go into a bit more of the speculations about Perez? You know, I think a lot of people are pretty certain now that he's going to take Alex Albon's seat at Red Bull.
I think it's looking a lot more feasible than it was earlier in the season.
In my opinion, Albon just shouldn't be at Red Bull for his own good, for the good of his career, and Red Bull don't really want him there, so it's a no-brainer for both drivers for me. Albon will end up back at AlphaTauri, and you'll have Albon and Gasly there, and Kvyat won't have a seat. And I think pairing of Perez and Max would be a really good pairing for me.
I think we touched on this last week, didn't we? I think for the Red Bull, they need to start looking ahead at how Mercedes have done it. If you've got a number one driver, which you clearly do in Max Verstappen, no one's disputing that Max Verstappen is the number one driver and the best driver of that team, no matter who you pair with him, unless you pair Lewis Hamilton with him. That being said, if you've got Lewis Hamilton, he's got Valtteri Bottas.
Exactly, yeah.
Whilst he's capable of winning races in the Mercedes, isn't going to push Hamilton to a point where they're going to compromise the team.
No.
Where Nico did.
No.
So if you follow that model and then you get Sergio Perez, who hasn't got an ego, who just puts his head down and drives every weekend, loves the sport, probably would die for the sport. He's that ingrained into it now. He would be the perfect number two driver because he's not going to get in Max's way. Horner's going to love him because he's
got nothing to prove. Sergio.
Exactly.
Everyone knows he's a good driver.
Yeah.
And he's not like Albon, who's at the start of his career and has got loads of things to prove to everyone. And we touched on this last week, so we won't spend too long talking about it. But I think that now that move is looking a lot more likely. It would be a great move for all parties involved. I think it'd be good for Albon to get away from Red Bull. It'd be good for Sergio Perez to have a seat at a top-tier team again. And it'd be good for Max that they can actually challenge Mercedes.
Exactly.
Because without two drivers that working in the same way that Merc are, they got no hope. No hope whatsoever.
And this has been the thing that everyone's touched on all season has been Max has been great. He's been up in third. And then you have to go down some way to where the next Red Bull is. It was the same problem last year, which is why Pierre Gasly got removed from the seat. Albon's doing the same thing. I think on fairness, surely you have to remove Albon from that seat now.
Yeah, and I think Kvyat has had enough chance to prove himself and hasn't, in my opinion.
You're not going to beat Mercs with one driver.
No, absolutely not, because it's the same thing. Like, if one Merc is miles out in front, the other one holds up the pack. Not on intentionally, but that Merc is so fast that even on a bad day, it's gonna pose challenges for Red Bull. So if Lewis Hamilton's in front and Bottas is racing Max and making Max challenge him and have to go past him, it just gives Lewis Hamilton the chance to just drive away.
Exactly.
And if Red Bull had that, they would be much more competitive as a team.
Well, they'd be firmly cemented in second place and, as you touched on, challenging Mercedes for the constructors, which at the moment for Mercedes
it's just
is a cakewalk.
There's
no point competing.
No, it really isn't.
And there's no point competing for second because Max is so far ahead of everyone else.
Exactly, yeah.
But again,
this
is the thing you get dragged into is, what would Perez look like in a better car?
This is becoming a common theme, though. Nearly every single week now, you hear Max say on the radio, they're too far ahead. Let's just race our own race. And those are words that are coming out of his mouth nearly every single week now because, Mercedes are so far ahead. He's like, well, there's no point trying to challenge Mercedes. Let's just do our own thing.
And they're not developing their car and they're still so far ahead.
I know, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy behaviour. So where were we? We were talking about Russell. Let's go. We were talking about the race. So we had the incident in the first lap. A couple of laps of safety car with George Russell out in front. Very early restart from Russell. Very, very early restart.
But, when you're out front in the Mercedes, you may as well go early because you're not going to be...
Yeah.
It's not that you're going to be caught, but you don't want to hang about in the dirty air and you want to clear Bottas as quickly as you can and build up a nice gap.
Yeah.
And
do you want to run us through what happened for the next couple of... let's look at the next 20 laps. It
was just more of the same. You had Mercedes miles out ahead. They were in a class of their own because Max wasn't there, which we were robbed of, and Charles I don't think on race pace they were going to do anything. One lap pace, it's very similar to last year. One lap pace, they're all right, and then it gets to the last year. So it was just a bit of a. It wasn't. I wouldn't say a procession. We did see some good moves.
Yeah,
Perez,
the midfield, great racing in the midfield.
It was about a train of 6.
Yeah, that battle for 3rd and 4th was really, really good. I got to hand it.
Ooh, got to give it to him. Carlos Sainz had an amazing weekend.
Yeah.
Moved up
so did Daniel Ricciardo, Sainz, Lando Norris, Esteban Ocon, both the racing points. Like, it was a good weekend all around for the midfield, I think. Mm-hmm. Because they had that chance when the Mercs were ultimately sort of counted out of the race. Yeah. They had that chance to get a bit racy, and because there was, wasn't 2 cars out in front, there was a pack of cars together that were properly racing.
There was, and it was 5 or 6 cars that were so even that they couldn't gain on each other.
No.
Because they were in each other's slipstreams and just all as fast as each other. Danny Rick looked like he was going to make the most of it, but Sainz did a fantastic job out front. And, went up from 8th, and then obviously because of the incidents on lap 1 went up to 3rd, so fantastic start. Lando obviously had an engine penalty. They've been struggling all weekend with issues. I mean, Carlos had issues, Lando had engine problems as well. They had to change it. He dropped to the back. And so you were looking at it like, okay, here we go, going to plod along. Mercedes going to... And then after the set of first pit stops, you were like, okay, this is pretty good, Everyone
and then it all... It was horribly wrong.
It wasn't, and then obviously Latifi retired. Still some great battling in the midfield, and again, it was probably the most entertaining part until what happened was probably the midfield. Just so many great overtakes, and then let's get to it. So
I honestly, you saw me. I was so annoyed. I literally was like, I'm not watching this sport anymore. I was like, I'm done with F1. I'm never watching it again.
So, coming out of
can I just give the short summary in that George Russell was basically taken out by his own Williams. He lost that race because of his own Williams car being driven by Jack Aitken.
Yes, Jack Aitken coming out of turn 11, spins it, drops it on the outside curb, and then you see him go in. His front wing collides with the end of the Armco, and so he spins around. Luckily, only lost his front wing. Manages to get to the pits, and it was like, okay, virtual safety car. It was right by a steward's post, so we thought, no harm, no foul. They'll just get in. I mean, Mercedes were complaining about the tethering on there, the structure of the wheels and the brakes, and it was all you're a bit worried, but you're like, oh, okay. Then Norris started reporting a loss of power after the first pit stops. You're like, oh god, what's going on here? But then Bono came on and was like, no,
Russell, not Norris.
Sorry, not Norris, Russell. And then he put the right engine default on, and it was like, okay, he's got his power back.
When I heard those words, I'm losing power. I'm like,
when he came out of the pits, and then you heard instantly no power, you're like,
fudge sticks.
There was a lot of thoughts, and then they get to the second set of pit stops, which, again, we've been through this quite a bit. Did they need to make it?
No.
Yes or no?
No. What was the point?
But their tyres were falling off.
Yeah, but they're still the fastest car by miles.
And
even
Perez was coming up.
Yeah, but let's put it this way, right? I'm sorry, from a World Championship winning team, from any team that's in Formula One, that is simply not good enough. No. In my opinion. It's just not good enough to not... And I understand all teams make mistakes, but purely from there's a reason why tyres have to be, assigned to specific cars. It wasn't safe for any of the parties involved. It wasn't safe for the drivers. It wasn't safe for the pit crew. They obviously weren't prepared for what was going on. And to me, it's just not good enough from the management of the team to, pull 2 cars in on a whim, not prepared. And put the wrong tyres on one car and send it out, then have to bring that said car back in. To me, that is craziness, and that should not have happened. Not only did it screw up both races for Bottas and Russell, then when Russell eventually gets a puncture and has to come back in again, it's just craziness, absolute craziness.
Yeah, it was silly. There's rumours out there that there was a issue on the radios, so when they called them in, they weren't ready for them.
Of course they weren't. They called them in too quickly.
You could see
weren't
that they
prepared.
weren't. The mechanics weren't even out, so there was a miscommunication somewhere. They then got the wrong tyres. They put on...
When Russell entered the pit lane, the mechanics weren't even out of the garage.
And it was a calamity. And you saw Bottas pulling in behind him. You're like, well, where's his tyres?
I can't remember the last time we saw Merck do something so, like you said, calamitous as that.
Germany. Germany 2019 was the last time they did something so atrocious with the race where they ended up.
And we don't bash Mercedes very often
when they ended up
on this show.
We try not to bash anyone, but
yeah, but we have bashed a few teams.
We bash a lot of people actually saying anything about that, but it was terrible. So they put the wrong set. I'm pretty sure they put Valtteri's set of mediums
on Russell's car
to try and cover off. So that was fantastic, wasn't it? And then I don't even know what they put, an old set of hards on.
I think they put qualifying tyres on Valtteri.
They put they put a practice set.
Tyres, not qualifying. Sorry. Yeah.
Actually, no, they didn't. Did they? They put the exact same set he'd just been doing on.
Oh, really?
Because they had the hards on, and then because they went to take it off and were like, we haven't got any tyres for him. Because they just put them on George Russell's car,
and that was the beginning of the end.
And
really, for Merck's
it was
race.
all downhill from there.
From there, you could have thought, oh, maybe they can race their way back up to the front because they had time. They did have time. They had 20 odd laps, and Russell did race his way up to the front of the pack in the end.
Yeah,
made it back into first place, and everyone was like, "God, what a race this has turned out to be." George Russell deservedly getting his first points, probably his first win at this stage. And then it's just all goes wrong again.
Yeah, he gets himself back up to second, didn't he?
Yeah, but there was no way Perez was holding him off.
No, because he was lapping everyone so much faster.
Yeah, like seconds a lap quicker.
As soon as he got past Bottas, it was
not seconds.
That was his. Well, it was almost
like half a second.
He took 5/10 out before he got his puncture, and then coming out of turn 8, you hear Bono over the radio say, "We've got a slow puncture in the rear," and it was just. The icing.
Every F1 fan in the world just let out a collective groan at that point.
Obviously, not a great weekend for the commentators. Crofty and Brundle had an absolute shocker this weekend.
They did. Absolute got a lot of things wrong, didn't they?
Crofty, listen, I like Crofty on commentary. I don't mind Brundle, but it was a bad race this weekend. Like Brundle not knowing who's gone into the pits when Russell comes out and he says, Bottas came in and then Russell was going round and he was like, Russell's not going to have enough gap. He's going to be 4 seconds behind. Not looking at the timings or anything. And then Crofty just saying that Bottas had a slow puncture, not realising that Bono was on the radio to Russell. It was not a good weekend for the commentators.
I think personally, George Russell was robbed really 100%. By that calamitous pit stop. If that hadn't happened, even if he'd had the puncture, if that hadn't happened, he would have won.
Yeah.
Even if he'd had the puncture, probably would have had enough time to get a new set of tyres and race his way back to the front of the pack.
Well, as we know, hindsight's 20/20. So
yeah, no, exactly.
You go back, you would say, well, you don't need to put those tyres on. You've probably got enough tyres to cover.
Not even that. If they could have put the tyres on, and if they hadn't monumentally screwed it up so much,
I think Perez could have got ahead of Bottas.
Bottas just wasn't a good race for Bottas.
Wasn't a good
weekend for Bottas. That stellar race for George Russell, but not a great weekend for Valtteri Bottas.
Before we move on to the closing laps of the race, shall we touch on what the current status?
Conspiracy. Get your tinfoil out, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
Get your tinfoil hat.
This is what we're on about with the social medias.
Deep into the conspiracy theories. So, I saw. Well, I saw. I didn't see it.
We were sent
in our
a
Formula One group chat. A post was sent by our good friend Wooly about certain changes to social media accounts of both Valtteri Bottas and George Russell.
Certain drivers, yeah.
There's a lot of speculation going on at the moment about contracts and, George Russell just happens to remove Williams, any reference to Williams from his Instagram account, and Valtteri Bottas just happens to remove any reference to Mercedes from his Instagram account.
The most Finnish thing I've ever heard, just having driver.
After crunching the numbers and, making all the connections and scanning many internet forums, some conspiracy theorists have come up with the idea that perhaps we may be seeing a change of. I know you liken it to an NFL swap.
I think you've grown a bit hyperbolic there, Nathan.
Yeah.
It's not.
I mean, come on. People have just inferred it.
They
from
haven't crunched any numbers. They've looked at it like, oh shit, they've just taken their stuff out.
I'm trying to make it sound interesting.
But
trying to make it sound like some global conspiracy theory. Yeah.
Put the Twilight Zone theme on. No, but I've compared it to the NFL, saying I think it could be a case of going from the Chiefs, who were the best team, to going to the Jets or maybe the Giants or the Eagles. Going from the best to some of the worst teams.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think? I don't personally think it will happen this season.
It makes sense for George Russell.
Definitely. And it makes sense for Mercedes.
It makes absolutely no sense for Bottas to go down to Williams.
But hasn't Bottas signed a new contract already?
Yeah. So he's the only one who's confirmed.
Exactly. So I don't personally think, maybe after next season when the new cars come in, I could see it happening then. I can't see it happening now.
Lewis, sign the deal, Lewis.
Sign the contract.
You got to sign it, Lewis, because you don't want to be let's be honest, they're not replacing Lewis Hamilton. You can't replace
You can't replace the best driver
champion
on the grid.
No,
you just can't do
obviously
it.
That would be tinfoil if you started bringing that up. Yeah. But I think I'd love it. I would
love to see George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. And you can learn a lot from being with a driver that is that good and racing consistently with an absolute. Let's be honest, one of, if not the greatest Formula One drivers, probably the greatest Formula One driver of the modern era.
Debatable.
Yeah, it's definitely debatable. But
modern era, he's the greatest. If you're looking historically, he's top 3.
Yeah.
If you're looking even closer, you're probably saying he's top 2. I mean, I'm not going back into it. I'm not going into the full thing. But we know, for me, Michael is the greatest. We know for you,
I would still say Michael.
Lewis is the greatest.
I don't know.
Probably.
I'd still say Michael is my favourite driver.
He's my favourite.
It's the nostalgic era of Formula. Let's not get into this because we could have an entire episode talking about nostalgia.
We'll get into that at some other time.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think I can't see Bottas leaving for the 2021 season just because contracts have been signed. If
you're Mercedes, you've been doing everything by the book. Why would you defer from that pattern now, and why would you go to I want to call it the Red Bull route?
I don't know if you agree, but I can see it happening after next year, the 2022 season when the new cars come in. I can see it happening then.
Bottas or Hamilton are gone after 2021.
Do you reckon?
Bottas could be gone by mid-season, possibly, but it's unless Mercedes have done an absolute madness.
Do you reckon if Lewis wins next year, though, he goes?
Well, again, we'll have to see when he signs his deal. If he signs his deal, I mean, why wouldn't he? He's going. He doesn't need 8, but he's going for 8. Even though he could already be 8 if he didn't drive into the wall at China. But anyway, that's okay. I don't know. I think, listen, one of them's gone with it. If Lewis signs a 2-year deal, it's pretty obvious Bottas will be gone. If Lewis signs a 1-year deal, it's pretty evident that one or both of them will be gone.
To me, though, you got to look at it this way. Like, Lewis Hamilton strikes me as the type of guy that wants to break records. Like, I think, especially with a lot of the things that people say about him, he's only good because he's got the best car. I feel like to cement his place as the absolute greatest, he wants 8, and it may be beyond. He doesn't strike me as the type that would just stop. Just
relentless competitive spirit that man has.
So for me, I reckon if he wins 8, perfect. But I still don't think. I don't think he'll retire.
No,
I can see him staying on even if he wins 8.
I can see him staying for 1, maybe 2 years of the new regulations. See if he gets on with it. I mean, the man could probably drive for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And still dominate.
How old is Lewis now?
He's mid-30s now. So
if we're going by Kimmy's standard, he's got years left, mate.
Exactly. I mean, I can't see Lewis dropping down to Mercedes. Down to Williams, I meant. Correction. I don't think he'd be dropping down there like Kimmy dropped down to Alpha, of course, because it's.
So we're both of the consensus that I personally don't think Russell will join next. I would love to see it happen. I would love to see Russell at Mercedes.
Oh, you mean in 2021? Russell will not be lining up?
I don't see it next year, especially because Russell's just signed a new contract to Williams, and Bottas has just signed a new contract to Mercedes. Like, it would be so hard.
Again, like I said, unless they're just literally going to swap them because they own both drivers, then who knows? But
can't see it happening personally. But if it happens, I won't be annoyed. I'd feel bad for Bottas, but
again, like I said, that's not Mercedes model. This isn't how Mercedes operate.
No.
And the weekend it's an anomaly. The weekend, and that would be an anomaly if they did that, and I think it would rub people the wrong way if they got rid of Bottas in that fashion.
Yeah, because Bottas has got a lot of fans as well.
Exactly.
Bottas has got a big following.
And he's a good driver. People. I know he's been spanked by Lewis all year because
Lewis is just better.
That's exactly. But like they said in the cars, like George Russell said, there's only a tenth between them in qualifying. It's when it gets to the race, and that's when Lewis's racecraft and overall driving guile comes into it. But I think, listen, in 2 years it's going to be either an all-British lockout with George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, or it's going to be George Russell and a driver who's yet to be named.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll see. We'll see how it pans out.
Well,
so concluding the race, it was one of the more interesting podiums. We've had a lot of interesting podiums this year.
Nice to see Ocon get his first
Lovely to
podium.
see. He had a brilliant drive.
And nobody's begrudging Sergio Perez for getting his first race win. I think he's deserved a race win for a long time, especially this season. He's driven out of his skin this season.
That win in terms of feel probably only is topped by Pierre Gasly's win at Monza, which was
unbelievable.
Very similar, where Mercedes, that was more Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. They both messed up there for telling him that the pit lane. Anyway, we don't need to dwell on Monza. That was amazing though. Everything about the weekend was brilliant.
And I don't care what anyone says. The fact that Perez went from last to first, regardless of if cars in front of him dropped out,
he still had to overtake a lot of cars.
I think it just a testament to how good of a driver Sergio Perez is. And it's a joke to me that he doesn't have a seat next year. Yep. Absolute joke.
And it was just a great moment for him. First win, I think it was 196 races. His first win in F1,
But like you said earlier, though, he doesn't have an ego. He goes out there, he puts it on the line for his team and just does the best that he can. And it must be nice for him to get a race win because, like you said, he is not one to just think about himself constantly and constantly want the win. He just does exactly what the team tells him to, gets on with it. And to see him rewarded is really good. And I hope that he gets...
And the first Mexican winner since Pedro Rodriguez.
Oh, I see.
In 1970 was the last time a Mexican driver won the race, Only one of two, and he was the last Mexican world champion in 1970.
Well, next week will be the last iteration of Racing Point that we see. We'll be heading over to Aston Martin Racing after next week.
Yes.
I would personally love to see Aston Martin as their own full-on race team. It's going to be great. That'll be weird. It's the last race as Renault F1 next week as well.
Go to Alpine.
Any other ones?
It's weird that Renault won't be in the sport.
I mean, people say, like, well, strictly speaking, they will be, but, without Renault cars, we've had Renault for so long now.
Years, and it's going to be a strange sight.
And to me, I thought the whole point of bringing back Fernando Alonso was for the nostalgia. Not very nostalgic now. You're not Renault.
Exactly. You got your best part was with him, and equally your worst part with Flavio Briatore, and when they sent Piquet into the wall. I got to stop with these conspiracies and these terrible moments in F1 history.
Last bit I reckon we should probably run through was it was hard to really make anything of Fittipaldi and Aitken.
I would like to give them a special shout out. It's hard. They've just like Russell going into the Merc. They've had, but a lot different, obviously, because George Russell's been driving F1 cars. They had a lot of stuff going. It was a very quick circuit.
Well, I'm pretty sure
driving two of the worst cars on the grid.
Didn't Aitken out-qualify Latifi?
No,
he didn't.
He was very close. He was leading in most of the session. Technically finished higher than him because he retired. Well, he didn't actually retire from the race, did he? So, and Latifi did. So, I mean, Aitken over Latifi. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few people that would agree with you. Anyway, I think that's probably enough for today, considering this is a purely F1 episode. We've rambled on for 46 minutes now.
It's just as long as a normal episode.
Yeah, pretty much. Just goes to show how much we dilute the F1 content in the normal episode. But we will be back again this week. So this will hopefully be going up today on Tuesday, the day we've recorded it. And we'll be recording another episode tomorrow on Wednesday, which will be I'll be probably coming out on Thursday morning. I doubt it'll be out by Wednesday evening, just because the football will finish late. But
football doesn't finish till 10, so
exactly. So we will record another episode and hopefully have that up for you on Thursday for all the non-F1 fans who want to hear about something else. I didn't actually mention it in the beginning, but our social media links are down in the description. And you should definitely go down there and follow us because we post many interesting things.
Yes. Nate's meme game is strong right now.
But yeah, you should definitely go down, hit the subscribe button, turn your post notifications on, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter so you can keep up to date with anything we do post. And thank you very much, Evan. It's been great to get stuck in some proper F1 talk.
Muchas gracias.
Yes, definitely. So we will see you guys again soon. Thanks very much. Cheers, Ev.
Cheers, mate.